Welcome to the 4-Minute Show. I'm Saito.
And I'm Zhao.
And tonight we'll be talking about Brazil and their involvement in World War II.
World War II lasted from 1939 to 1945. Brazil remained neutral until the attack on Pearl Harbor, however they played a large role in the victory of the Allies. I'm Zhao, and here's Carlos Martinez, a Brazilian historian, joining us tonight.
It's actually Martinez, but it's okay.
So what was Brazil's involvement in World War II?
At the beginning of the war, Brazil remained neutral, however they continued to trade with other countries. Brazil was the most important country of the Latin American countries because they allowed the United States to construct air bases right on the coast.
Prior to the war, Brazil's declaration of war against Germany on August 22, 1942, Brazilian civilians often protested in the streets about how negatively they thought about the Nazis. The Brazilians had such a deep hatred of the Nazis as well as fascists that emotional outbursts were aroused. Who sent troops to fight during the war?
The Brazilian Expeditionary Force was a unit made up of over 25,000 men and women who were prepared to fight the Germans in Italy during 1940. The Brazilian Expeditionary Force was the only unit from South America to send troops into combat. The Expeditionary Force took over 20,000 German prisoners, including 2 generals. On August 22, 1942, protesters in the street begged President Getulio Vargas to declare war on the Axis forces. When Brazil declared war, the protesters became soldiers in the Brazilian Expeditionary Force and joined the fight against the Germans in Italy. His size belies the rugged physique he acquired in the jungles of his homeland. Others might call his jungle impassable, but he trained in them. The Brazilian soldier is rated among the best of the Allied infantry units. Corporal Judd Cook, September 1944.
What was the government's response to the bombing of Pearl Harbor?
Within weeks of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Brazil and the rest of the Latin American countries either broke relationships with the Axis nations or declared war. I have been informed that the United States and Brazil has today been recognized that a state of war exists between Brazil on one hand and Germany and Italy on the other hand. The action taken today by your government has hastened the coming of the inevitable victory of freedom over oppression, of Christian religion over the forces of evil and darkness. President Franklin Roosevelt.
Who were the minority groups in Brazil during that time?
The minority groups in Brazil at the time were Japanese, Germans, Italians, and Jews.
Did the status of these minorities change during World War II?
The status did not really change too much, except however they were spread out throughout the country.
Did the status of women change during World War II?
The status of women did not change at all, or very rarely, because not too many men went off to war in the first place. However, women were allowed to volunteer to be nurses or in the Expeditionary Fighting Force. Now, I have some questions for you to answer. Who was the leader of Brazil during the war?
Getulio Vargas was the president at the time of World War II. During the war, he declared war on Germany, Japan, and Italy, and he sent all Brazilians of those descents to concentration camps. Brazil was ruled under a dictatorship because most of President Vargas' decisions were made without a Congress.
So what was Brazil's response to the Holocaust?
During the Holocaust, many Latin American countries, including Brazil, refused to admit Jewish refugees. This is because of anti-Semitism and the fear of economic competition. The admittance of Jewish immigrants in Brazil reduced from 96,000 to 12,000 from 1933 to 1941. But after World War II, many Holocaust survivors settled in Brazil.
Brazil was one of the founding members of the United Nations and has been an active member of the organization since 1945. Brazil played an important role in the war by allowing the United States to create air bases in major cities, as well as contributing their own men and women to an expeditionary fighting force. Out of all the Latin American countries, Brazil was the biggest contributor to the Allied war.
Thanks for joining us tonight on 4 Minutes. Be sure to tune in next week when we talk about the Cold War.